we'll be having a thought-provoking panel session to be moderated by Ewoma Oyibota.
So the topic of this panel session is building a sense of fiscal responsibility on citizens in a time of increasingly disposable income. I can see the smiles on the face of the panelists because this seems to be a hot topic. You know, disposable income has been, quite hot in Nigeria these days. So we'll start with Mr. Vincent, and we'd like to start by, let's talk through fiscal responsibility and how it affects taxes generally.
Thank you, Zeno. I mean, there's no way you talk about fiscal responsibility or fiscal policies without talking about taxation. Of course, like we know too well, I assume, fiscal policies center majorly around, government spending, government funding expenditure, and the likes. And of course, tax is perhaps the single most important source of government revenue. If you then bring it out to fiscal responsibility, you then need to think about transparency and accountability, on the part of government when it comes to government expenditure. I know for a fact that some state governments, for example, Lagos State, free advert alerts, there's a publication of the financial statements of Lagos State, for example, and I believe some other states as well, where you can actually, where you have access to the financial statements that will detail all of the revenue that the government got and from different sources, as well as the expenditure, that the government incurred, for that particular financial year. So if you then draw, a relationship between that level of expectation of responsibility on the part of the government, taxpayers ordinarily want to see their taxes working for them. While the requirement to pay tax is a matter of law, it's also important to understand that there is a social contract between the government and taxpayers where the law has mandated taxpayers to, remit taxes as and when due. But then on a related note, taxpayers also want to see government put, those taxes to good use and to ensure that their taxes are working for them. So that social contract needs to be upheld at all times, I would say, because if, as a taxpayer, as a business owner, I am paying taxes, regularly, and I ensure that I'm compliant with all my obligations to pay and remit taxes, I also want some sort of encouragement, if you will. While I agree that it is not a matter of choice to pay taxes or not to pay, it's a matter of law, and I want to ensure compliance as a responsible corporate citizen. I also want some form of encouragement to see that my taxes are working for me. And I know that we've seen some developments in recent times about taxpayers being able to determine how their taxes will work for them. For example, the Executive Order 7, the Road Infrastructure Tax Credit Scheme, where taxpayers were more or less given the powers to determine how their taxes should be spent. With the whole, if you apply the Apapa or Shoki Expressway, we should know very well that that route was rehabilitated by Dangote Group, and that is an opportunity for taxpayers to determine how their taxes should work for them. So I think if you can achieve that balance, where taxpayers have complied by paying their taxes as and when due, and then government can, demonstrate, government can show working to see that I have put these taxes to good use, that encourages voluntary compliance. And in the long run, you're going to have a multiplier effect because, you can ask the regulators, I believe that it is easier when taxpayers comply voluntarily than when you have to run after them, and make them comply. So if taxpayers comply with their duties, and then government is able to demonstrate responsibility in terms of spending and expending those taxes to good use, it encourages voluntary compliance, and that gives a win-win situation for both taxpayers and the government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vincent. So talking about, seeing the effect of taxes as an incentive for taxpayers to pay their taxes, let's not forget that, generally in the academic front, we say that usually you're to pay your taxes as your duty as a citizen, and you're not supposed to get any direct benefits as for paying that taxes. Well, direct benefit mean that because I paid my taxes, they're going to come and do the road in my street. So me being direct benefit, so to speak, because the government might want to prioritize what they feel should be the welfare of the society at any given time. But how do we look at that mindset with respect to the public generally? Because we understand what taxes are, they don't. They look at, I committed a road offense, last month fined me, I'm paying for my levy, my local government levies. So they feel like all this revenue goes to the government and they feel like they should get some sort of thing for it. So how do we firstly tackle that mindset to make people understand what exactly taxes are and how those taxes are to be applied, in terms of how, the different revenue generating agencies. So you have a businessman who has brought in some 5 containers and said, oh, customs has charged me 20 million. I'm still going to pay 30% taxes. I'm not encouraged, this government, they're just taking money from us. How do we arrange that mindset? How do we modify it in terms of making the populace to understand, the different kinds of taxes that they pay, the different types of levies that they pay, the differences, if any, between such payments to the government? I think I'll let Mr. Christopher take that.
Thank you so much for the question. So I will pick up from where Vincent left it. So when we talk generally about the social contract that is there between the taxpayer and the tax authority or the government, as the case may be, oftentimes you hear statements, especially from the majority of the people, okay, what do they use the funds for? And it's not really equitable in a way. But they must also understand that the tax system anywhere in the world is not a quid pro quo. It's not a favor for favor system. That the amount of tax investment that people pay with respect to the tax remittances is going to be equivalent or proportional to the benefit that you're going to derive from taxation. So that shouldn't be. So we should disabuse our minds. You just like you have mentioned, it's a civic responsibility. Government has a responsibility also to deploy whatever resources, whatever public fund they have in the best way. And that creates that level of trust such that, just like he mentioned, there's going to be an increased level of compliance. And it's always very important for people, especially taxpayers, to know that it pays to be compliant. So if you are compliant with a tax regulation, with a tax law, oftentimes it's not all the instances. There are a number of benefits that you can take advantage of, and that's just because of the low level of tax education we have within the society. So people just view taxes generally as if it's a punitive measure, more like a burden. And that is coming from the point of we really do not understand the tax system. So I feel if there is an increased level of advocacy when people understand what exactly the tax system is, and there is a level of transparency also from government, that particular perception will win at some point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to bounce off your last statement of transparency, right? And I'm going to tie it to the topic where we've spoken about fiscal responsibility and increasingly disposable income, reduced disposable income. So we cannot deny, as tax professionals, as members of the society ourselves, that the idea of fiscal responsibility in terms of government spending, and then the proportionate on the flip side of the coin where we have the reduction in disposable income, so to speak. Creating a balance has become such of an issue, so much of an issue in recent times, where you tune into your radio, your TV, everybody's talking about these people, even the informal sector, you have the market women saying, oh, we're not making enough sales, and these people they come and levy us every day, and all that. So and that's where we are currently in Nigeria. As much as we would like to say good things about our country, it's important that we embrace the reality of where we are. So how do we create a balance between that? Because we've had so many operas in the news. I'm not going to mention specific instances, but I believe that we all know what we're talking about in terms of the responsibility of, okay, this income has come. And let's also not forget that, reduced income is also reduced taxes. Because if a company was generating 100 million and is now generating 20 or 30 or 50 million, of course, the taxes going to the government have also reduced. So how do we then strike a balance between fiscal responsibility with specific reference to government expenditure, government spending, and most importantly, transparency in government spending with regards to the disposable income that the masses are currently experiencing, and how we convince them in that state that they are, because they feel like they're in a sorry state, and the government should, when you hear them talking, you say, oh, the government should have mercy on us. So they want the government to have mercy on them, in quotes. So how do we create that balance, fiscal responsibility, transparency, and of course, the reduction of disposable income? I'll let Mr. Adeyemi take that.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, for disposable income to either increase, you either increase your income or you reduce your costs. And as you know, there are some costs that are fixed variables. The shelter, your feeding, school fees, and some fixed variable costs that you might have. So we could see that that's one of the reasons why the labor clamored for increase in income, because before now, we say your take home, your monthly income is your take home. Some said I cannot take you home again, even to your bus stop. We might not even take you to your bus stop again. So how are we going to address that? We see people trekking the long distance just to manage a mega cost income at the moment. So I think that's where government should come in with some cushion effects on the masses. We could see, because there are some constraints that are beyond us. We are not in the government sphere, and FRS is, as indicated, they are just here to collect taxes, not to generate. So FRS is also we are together in quotes. So those in affairs, those determining the policies and the like. So that is where government needs to come in with some incentives and say, we're bringing in some cushion effect. It was in maybe 2 presidents ago that the word palliative came in, and the unfortunate thing is that people who are saying the palliatives are just something that were not working. People will have loved to enter I could see the state government reduce the price of bus fares by some percentages, and many people enjoy. It was open to everybody. It was not a political thing. So, and where people see that the incentives are quite genuine, people will appreciate that this is happening, and we are seeing. On the other hand, people should also see that you are also feeling what you are feeling. Not that we are in suffering state and you are buying huge amount of vehicles, unnecessary vehicles, replacing assets that are not obsolete. Just because you are coming into the tenure, you have to buy a new. So, sincerity also needs to come in kind of government spending. Not too critical areas also are very important, but some other areas that are really reducing this revenue. Lagos State earns quite a lot of revenue per year, but where people see what these revenues are used for, some unnecessary spendings, people tend to now agitate that our revenues, our taxes are not being used appropriately. So I think at the point of responsibility, people can also see that, like we married men, people say that if you're able to open to your wife what you are earning, some school of thought, please, no, it's not me, that if you open to your wife what you are earning, she might not disturb you that much, and she might be reasonable in acting for some things. But where you don't disclose the income and she sees that you're just balling, you went to Chief Video yesterday, you are doing 1 or 2 things, man, she'll be like, it's like there's something somewhere. That's when she will know the iPhone 17 that will come 2 years time. I want to pre-order it now because it appears my husband has money. So other way around. So it's about sincerity. And when we all see that everybody is feeling it, we'll all be sure that how can we collectively work it out. But when we are seeing that those that are meant to even help us are just living a lavish life and not really bothering about what we feel, then people tend to clamor. But sincerity and efficient spending is to come in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adeyemi. So I would just, off the back of what you just spoke about, increasing income. Now, increasing income, when you talk about increasing income in Nigeria, it's a bit worrisome, especially for the tax space, especially in a time where we have a lot of companies exiting the ecosystem. Now, in my experience as with global expansions, a lot of people, a lot of companies, they want to move into those countries that their taxes are a bit light, tax havens, everybody wants to go to Mauritius, everybody wants to go to BVI, Some people want to go to the Dubai Free Trade Zone. I mean, sorry if you're a Nigerian. But companies are constantly looking for ways to cut costs, be it employee costs and also tax costs, right? And currently we have a situation where it's become a weekly thing for companies to exit the country. Now, when these companies exit, the average citizen, people are thinking about, okay, there's loss of jobs. And then we are also thinking, we're thinking for the government to say there's also loss of revenue, loss of taxes as well. Now, how do we then, there are things that cause people to, try not to pay their taxes, to avoid paying their taxes. So somebody who was working in, say, Guinness has now been put out of a job and then opens a small shop in front of the house. He's no more, in quotes, in the tax net. He has somehow, he's found a way to make a living for himself, but he has fallen out of the tax net because when he or she was working in Guinness, it was automatic. The company files the payee and everything, but now he's falling out of that tax net. And so how do we create a balance? How do we fill up those vacuums that this exit is causing? And then how do we then, so I think that the most important thing now is the taxpayers themselves, because if they don't see the need to pay those taxes, they will do anything within their power to try to avoid paying those taxes. Now, for those of us in the corporate sector, it's quite easy, but with particular reference to the informal sector, how do we, put that tax compliance culture, how do we, point them in the right direction to say, see, we understand the fact that things are not as smooth as you expect them to be, but it is important that you pay your taxes. I'll let Mr. Kennedy take us through that.
Thank you very much. I think your question is being directed to the informal sector, right? So how do we address those challenges associated with informal sector? Okay. Of course, I need to make this known. There's no country that can tax a poverty. You can't tax a poverty. And what you don't have, you can't give it. So there are so many abuse in the place of governments, in the side of governments. And of course, people are trying to leverage on this. What do I mean by abuse? Citizen believes that they are expecting a lot from the government, right? From their taxes that have been paid. And when you have expectations and you are able to, you are not meeting up with the expectation that you have. Like government is dashing out your expectations. So there is what will happen to you as a woman naturally. So how do government now disabuse the mind of people about what people already had? For example, you are expecting someone who sell atarodo in the markets to pay tax. You are expecting someone, an Igbo man, who is just, his revenue is, let's just say is 30 million in a year to pay tax. Of course, kudos to the federal government, the federal inner revenue. Like if your revenue is less than 25 or equal to 25 million, you are exempted from paying tax. So I believe that there is a place of tax education. So many of us, we have, our mind has been abused or disabused with so many thoughts, so many things. What are they even using my tax for? What is it? What is it that is visible that the government is spending what I'm paying on? So some people even they even this tax, if I want to pay, I won't pay it. I would rather use it for another thing. Some people even believe that this thing, I would rather go and give it out to another person. So how do we reorientate our people? Is to come up with tax education. transparency. One of the speakers have said it. Is you have to tell us what you are using our money for. There has to be a visible project, something that we can see. Even a blind man, if you cannot see, you should be able to think about it. That this is what we are using the money for. These are the projects we are using the money for. So there should be even tax education. Thank God for Unilag Tax Club. It's just an avenue, to orientate people. Do a jungle, right? Thank God for what these the committee, what they are doing. They are trying to rehabilitate people, and they are meeting with governments, they are meeting with individuals, society, and others. So I believe at the point where we are in the nation, there's a need for tax education. There's a need to orientate people. Okay, of course, we are not trying to task you people, Mr. Taiwo Udele said that government is not trying to tax production. So they're not trying to tax the seed, but they're trying to tax production. So there is a need to continually orientate the mind of our people. And another thing is physical project is very, very important. When you make progress, at least if I'm a blind man, for example, it's an analogy. I'm a blind man. My food is in your hands. So I kept something in your hands. And I'm not hearing any sound. Of course, I cannot see, right? I should be able to hear a sound. Like, okay, what I see the food I see have in your hands is kept properly, right? But if I'm not hearing any sound, right, my thought will be like, this man has finished my food. What is happening to my food? So I will have a lot of thoughts, several thoughts in my mind. I'll be running in my mind. So, and we don't have to wait to see what is happening in Kenya. See people now, protesting. Government don't have to wait for that. Of course, government is trying, but they need to try more, right? So they need to go and meet them in the market, encourage them, give them reasons why I should do it. Give them reason why it's important. You understand? So I believe if government can put all these things together, it's going to, the informal sector will be encouraged, to remit their tasks and even charges. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy. So off the back of what you've just said, I know we've spoken about tax education, and of course we commend the Unilag Tax Club for that. I know that they do tax walks, they go to markets, they go to the rural areas and try to sensitize, the populace on the importance of paying taxation. Now, I think that brings me to my next question. You also spoke about, having the government to make things easy for them. When you have a seed, you need to be able to plant it, and then there needs to be a time for it to grow. You don't plant it today and it grows tomorrow. I was in a session hosted by Mr. Taiwo Udele himself, and he said his committee had compiled the list of taxes for manufacturers in Nigeria. And if I remember correctly, he said there are about 120 different taxes. What? 147, thank you very much. 147 different taxes that manufacturers have to pay before their products start coming into the market. Now, when you look at that, obviously, you don't need any expert to tell you that those taxes also affect the price of the commodities as they go into the market. So the question that comes to mind is tax holidays something that can function in Nigeria, whereby we say, for a certain period of time, if you're a business, if you're a manufacturer, you don't have to pay tax for the next 5 years, or, some sort of because we see that other jurisdictions have situations where they give tax holidays. Of course, there are criteria for you to qualify, for such tax holidays. So is this something that can work in the Nigerian system in light of our current economic realities? I'll let Mr. Vincent take that.
Okay, thank you for that. Just to put it out there that there are currently a number of tax incentives that are applicable. I wrote a piece a couple of months ago. I was published in the papers about reviewing the current system of granting tax incentives and measuring that against other performances. Because when you talk about tax incentives, there are two arguments, right? Recently, the Senate committee also mentioned how the country has lost up to 17 trillion naira, as a result of tax incentives and waivers that have been granted to companies over the last 5 years. But that is one side of the argument. When you look at tax incentive, you need to understand that, just like you said, when you plant a seed today, you don't get immediate results. You need to understand it as an investment on the part of the government to say, I understand that there are certain peculiarities that affect these industries or these businesses. And for that reason, I want to see you grow. I want to see you, stabilize from from inception up to the point where you start making profits, and then I can then come after you to ask you for taxes. Now, there's for example, the very popular one, there's the Pioneer Status Incentive, the PSI. And what that does is, the government has said, okay, for these identified industries, products, or services, I'm going to grant you a tax holiday for 3 years in the first instance, meaning from when you start business, for the next 3 years, you are not going to pay any tax. And then you can extend that for up to 2 years. So in total, you can get up to 5 years exemption. Now, that's the idea behind that is to encourage activities in that space, is to encourage and encourage investment so that people can commit funds and make investment in that space. And when that space then grows to the point of maturity, if you will, it's at that point that the government can then come to say, oh, you need to start paying taxes after enjoying exemption for these 5 years. Of course, there are a couple of others. There's the road infrastructure tax credit scheme I mentioned, where taxpayers were given the rights to the powers to determine how their taxes are spent, especially on roads that affect their businesses. There's also the exemption for small companies, any less than 25 million naira in an annual year, where you are exempt from income tax, you are exempt from education tax, and there's also the small matter of VAT burden that you don't have to deal with, because again, the idea is that you're an SME, you are not earning so much money, right? I don't want to overburden you with compliance costs. I don't want to overburden you with taxes. So you enjoy these incentives, for the period where you remain a small company or even a medium-sized company, where the rate is reduced, to 20%. Of course, there are also the free trade zones, where designated areas have been mentioned to grant certain exemption, especially on income taxes, to companies that are operating within those zones, to the extent that you are what is called an approved enterprise, carrying out approved activities. Of course, there are conditions that you need to fulfill. Of course, some of those incentives would only be enjoyed by, large organizations who can commit to the, intensive capital outlay that will be applicable in the first instance. But I think over time, there's been a lot of, dimensioning to ensure that different incentives apply to different, players in different industries, and based on their size, for example, revenue, such that it is not only reserved for a few, and to ensure that everybody can, benefit from these incentives depending on the peculiarities. So if you look at all of that and bring it home, I think clearly there needs to be a balance, because on the side of the taxpayers, you grant incentive, you grant tax holidays, you grant them exemption from taxes. And then on the side of the government is thinking, oh, I'm losing money because you are not paying me taxes. In fact, I've lost 17 trillion over the last 5 years. But then the counter argument would then be that, oh, in those 5 years, for example, while you are saying that you've lost 17 trillion, this number of businesses have been set up, jobs have been created, economic activities have, improved over time in certain jurisdictions or in certain localities. And then, of course, these businesses also pay other taxes, even when they are not paying income tax, for example. They're also paying transaction taxes like VAT and duties that may be applicable. So I think it's important to find the balance in terms of quantifying, where possible, the benefits, that the exemptions or the incentives have created vis-a-vis whatever the government may be doing in terms of investment in the first instance. I think when we have that balance, it drives home the point and can then make an argument for those incentives to continue.
Okay, thank you very much. So for our final question, before we take closing remarks, I want to talk about digitization, right? Another thing that might aid, of course, that obviously aids, the payment of taxes is, when those taxes are easy to pay, right? Now, another thing that we hear SMEs, taxpayers complain about is, it's also stressful for them to have to log into this portal or log into that portal. So where are we in terms of digitization of the tax system? And what incentives can do digitization, present? While I sat there while the debates were going on, I was thinking that if, for example, we had a system where, as a business, you could impute, I just have my shop, and I know that there's a government software that automatically does my books for me. I just need to put in my spending, put in what comes in on a daily basis, and on a daily basis, I can see my tax rate. I can see what tax I have to pay, even if it's the middle of the month, and it keeps on growing or reducing, depending on what the books of the business say. So where are we on digitization? How does digitization help us in terms of spreading the tax net and ensuring that taxes are paid, especially in a world where, of course, cross-border transactions are done digitally? We've had several arguments, Meta, TikTok, Instagram. We have so many vendors on Instagram. I'm sure every one of us here has purchased something on Instagram or Twitter, as the case may be. So how does digitization help us, to broaden the tax net and ensure that, we actually get those taxes? Now, the flip side to that is, how do we then use digitization to hold the government responsible? Because remember that we're also still speaking about fiscal responsibility, for them to say, okay, do we want accounts published every year or quarterly or half year? Do we want accounts published? We want to see names, want to see figures, want to see transparency? How does digitization help us do that? I'll let you take that, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. I think there's been quite a lot that's been done within that space, and that cuts across all the tax authorities that we have in the country. The FRS, the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service leading the pack when it comes to state boards. So we've had a number of initiatives. For the FRS, you have the Tax Promax. For Lagos State Internal Revenue Service and a number of the other state boards, they also have similar platforms. LRS has eTax, EBS, and a number of these platforms in order to make the process of filing and also even payment easy for taxpayers. But there's still much more to be done, and there are discussions around e-invoicing, even for VAT purposes and all of those things. But they are capital intensive, and they also will be done on the premise of reliable data. And that's a bit of a challenge that we have, having reliable data. So we have had instances, okay, for instance, maybe I should step back a bit. So governments generally will intend to deploy two major tools in order to manage macroeconomics. Maybe it's the fiscal policy or it's monetary policy. We have had instances, especially when you have situations that an economy is in a recession or in a near recession, that a government generally wants to run a deficit budget, and that is because it intends to increase spending or perhaps reduce tax revenue. And in that instance, you have seen instances when government increases spending. Oftentimes, they have engagement with private sector. You have had instances, government is building roads, Lagos to Calabar. So these are investments that you want to modulate the level of economic activity within the space. But it has its own downsides too. When government brings in a lot of revenue or spends a lot in order to trigger the level of economic activity, there might be the issue of inflation. So in all of this, the government has tried to digitalize the process. I think, for instance, in Lagos State, you have taxpayer filing done on that portal. We have had assessment issued on the portal. And even individuals responding to assessment can be done on that portal and can easily just conclude everything without having to engage directly with any of the officials of the tax authority. So that is a step in the right direction. But there are also issues, because I also understand, I could remember during the last filing season, there were certain requirements that were brought on board. I guess maybe because of the level of enlightenment at that point in time, it caused a bit of a downtime. Even the platform went off for a while because of the level of activity that happened at that point in time. So, but I think it's a learning curve and it's a continuous process. So we can't compare the tax system with the level of digitization now as against where we were 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So it has really moved, but there's still a lot to do. And I guess that starts with having a reliable database. I think that's a bit of a challenge at this point in time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll just take closing words from each of the panelists on our topic. Just anything else you want to say. Once again, our topic is building a sense of fiscal responsibility on citizens in a time of increasingly reduced disposable income. So I'll start with you, Mr. Vincent.
Well, thank you very much. So when you talk about disposable income reducing, I'm also affected. In fact, just before I stepped on stage, I just got paid for the month, and I already calculated how much was going to Madam, how much was going for this expense or that expense. You know, it's what it is. But I think it's important that we all strive to, find a balance. If you can't increase your income, you have to find a way to manage your costs. On the part of the government, it will be good to see a lot more, responsible behavior, if you will, to reinforce the trust that the people will have in the government. Thank you.
Yes, so I know maybe focusing majorly on individuals. I know maybe not many corporate entities are around here. Why we are also still complaining, I think one of the key areas where most individuals, entities tend to be exposed to tax liabilities are incomplete records and improper keeping of those records, having enough documentation to substantiate certain things. I know Lagos State, I understand that Lagos State wanted to start imposing them reviewing your bank statements before issuing your tax clearance. I know when they start that one, I can imagine the war that will start, because most people's credit entry into their bank statements can never be explained. And so if there is an intense, and there are some that could be explained, it could be reimbursement or something. So just imagine you don't have enough documentation to back such up. There is no way you can convince your state authority not to subject it to tax. So for us as responsible citizens, for corporate entities, get your records straight. In my office, if you travel and get advance payments, you must reimburse with documents. Once you cannot retire with documents, you will bear it yourself. So let's get prepared. Let's start keeping records as responsible citizens, such that we will not be exposed to unnecessary tax liabilities. And we hope that income start getting better, and then proper planning. We should not just say income. So people are not proper planning their income. So let's plan our income as appropriate, such that we will not be caught unaware and having budget deficit every month in that, and you start borrowing from people, which could bring shame. So proper planning also should be put in place for individuals. Thank you very much.
Okay, so for me, I guess I will start from the point of certain incentives that even individuals now enjoy. Through the Finance Act of 2020, we had the exemption of minimum wage earners. even though you know it's just currently it's just 30,000 per month. The good thing about the way that particular section was worded is the fact that it refers to minimum wage and not tied it to a particular amount. Because in that instance, if you just put 30,000, 40,000, inflation will just erode everything 2 years, 3 years down the line. So, but the point would then be that the bulk or the majority of the people that are actually taxed under the employment scheme are not minimum wage earners. And there has to be some efforts too from government in order to increase the level of incentive as a way that they also enjoy. So I think a number of these points are what the presidential committee also is looking at. And I feel once we have a holistic approach to all of these things, we have a better tax system going forward. Thank you.
So government is a stakeholder. So whether you like it or not, you are going to pay tax. So the only two things that are very sure is tax and debt. So whether you like it or not, you are going to pay. So, and tax is used to regulate, is a means to an end, not an end himself. So my take home is for us to work on ourselves, ensure you are increasing your income, ensure you learn skills, digital skills that will help you in try time. Because government will keep on bringing policies, regulations, and so many things just to increase their revenue. So I will encourage every one of us to sit down, sit back, ensure what can you think, what can you work upon, how can you multiply your income. So that's my take. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all our panelists. A round of applause for them, please. So for me, I think that we would all agree that the key takeaways from this is, firstly, of course, tax education. So I know that the FIRS, LIRS, they are constantly doing that, supporting the various tax clubs to do that. And while we are trying to increase our income, just like Mr. Kendi has said, I think this is also a very good platform for us to appeal to the government with regards to transparency, management of public funds, right? We understand that we're all working together hand in hand to make the society better, but I cannot be trying to increase my income, and on the other hand, I'm paying my taxes, and then I cannot see, to put it lightly, the government is not showing workings. So let's have, whatever projects we're talking about, whatever sort of infrastructural developments we're talking about, let's not have white elephant projects. Let's see things that are actually going, to improve the lives of the masses. There's been a lot of outreach about the coastal highway. After the demolition, and all that, a lot of jobs were lost and all that. And things seem to be going quite slow after that. So it's a two-way street, and I believe that the government and the citizens can meet in the middle, and where there's fiscal responsibility and there's increased income, I believe that Nigeria is on a path to a better tax system. So thank you very much, everyone. A round of applause again for the panelists. Thank you.